The boardroom felt like it was closing in on me as I watched Marcus stride around the table, waving papers as if they were some grand prize. I had spent 10 years building my company from scratch, and now he thought he could take it all with a few fake signatures. "You should see your face," he said with a smug laugh, loosening his fancy tie. "Did you really think I'd let you run this forever?" A woman with just a high school diploma acting like a CEO. My name is Rachel Chin, and at 42, I was standing face to face with my husband as he tried to steal everything I had worked for. The irony wasn't lost on me. 12 years ago, when I first met Marcus, he was a junior accountant drowning in student loans. I was running a small but growing tech company and needed someone to handle the finances. He seemed like the perfect fit, smart, driven, and supportive of my vision. He understood numbers in a way I didn't, and I trusted him completely. That trust was my first mistake. "The board has already approved the transfer of power," Marcus said confidently, sliding some documents across the sleek mahogany table. "Your signatures on everything." "Really? You should thank me for making it so simple. No messy legal battles." I picked up the papers, examining the forged signatures he had somehow created. My hand stayed steady, and my voice was calm. Marcus had overlooked one critical detail. He thought I was just another lucky entrepreneur who had stumbled into success. What Marcus didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment for 3 years. It all started with a lipstick stain, not on his collar. Marcus was too careful for that. It was on a financial report he'd handed me. The smudge of red matched the shade his secretary always wore. That night, I began digging through our company records. What I found sent a chill down my spine: small discrepancies in the books, unauthorized transfers, board meetings I supposedly attended while I was overseas. Instead of confronting him, I took a different approach. I started buying shares of the company through shell corporations, using money I had secretly set aside for our anniversary trip to Paris. Every time Marcus thought he was pulling the strings to orchestrate my downfall, I was quietly increasing my ownership stake. By the time he made his move, I owned 80% of the company through entities he didn't even know existed. "I'm giving you a week to clear out your office," Marcus said smugly, glancing at his Rolex, the one I bought him for his birthday. "Be grateful I'm not having security escort you out." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "That's very kind of you, Marcus. I'll need that time to gather my things." He frowned, confused by my calm reaction. "That's it? No fight? No tears?" "Why would I cry?" I replied, picking up my briefcase. "Everything happens for a reason, right?" As I walked out, my heels clicking against the marble floor, I could feel his eyes on my back. He was probably patting himself on the shoulder, thinking he had finally won, that the woman who gave him everything was leaving with nothing. Outside the boardroom, I pulled out my phone and made a call. "Sandra, it's Rachel. Remember that contingency plan we talked about? It's time." Sandra, my lawyer for the past 20 years, was the one who had helped me set up the shell corporations. Marcus had no idea what was coming next. Sandra warned me about Marcus 3 years ago when she first noticed signs of his deceit. "Men like him always think of the smartest in the room," she'd said. "Use that." And I did. Every move Marcus made to take over my company had played right into my hands. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, watching employees trickle in with their coffee cups and worried expressions. News of Marcus's so-called takeover had spread fast. I could feel their pity, the woman who built everything now losing it all to her husband. By noon, Marcus had already moved into my office. My family photos were packed into a box by the door, replaced by his pretentious art and that awful modern desk he'd been obsessing over. He even changed the security codes, probably thinking I'd try to steal client files or company secrets. "I scheduled a company-wide meeting for this afternoon," Marcus announced, lounging in my chair with a smug grin. "Time to let everyone know about the changes in leadership." I nodded, calmly packing my things. "Of course. Will you be keeping Sarah on as CFO?" He laughed. "Sarah? No, I'm bringing in my own team. I can't have your loyal supporters hanging around causing trouble." Sarah had been with me since the beginning, back when we were working out of my garage with just 2 laptops and a dream. She was also the only other person besides Sandra who knew about my contingency plan. At 3:00 p.m., the main conference room was packed. Marcus stood at the front, practically glowing with pride, while I sat quietly in the back next to Sarah, whose knuckles had turned white as she gripped her tablet. As you've probably heard, Marcus began, there have been some changes in ownership. I know change can be unsettling, but under my leadership, this company will soar to new heights. That's when Sarah stood up. Actually, Mr. Chen, there's been a slight update to the ownership structure that you should be aware of. Marcus frowned. I don't recall asking for your input, Sarah. In fact, consider this your. Perhaps, I interrupted, standing up as well. You should take a look at these documents first. Right on cue, Sandra walked in, carrying a stack of papers that dwarfed the ones Marcus had flaunted earlier. Behind her were two members of the board. The real board, not the substitutes Marcus had used to push through his takeover. What is this? Marcus demanded, his confidence finally wavering. This, Sandra said, her voice commanding the room, is proof that Firetech Industries, Summit Ventures, and Highland Capital, three of the largest shareholders in this company, are all owned by your wife. The color drained from Marcus's face as Sandra continued, spreading out the documents on the table. Together, these entities control 80% of the company's shares, which means any leadership changes must be approved by the majority shareholder. That's impossible, Marcus stammered. Marcus sputtered, his voice cracking with desperation. I vetted every major shareholder personally. Did you? I asked, walking calmly to the front of the room. Or did you just see what you wanted to see? A bunch of impressive-sounding investment firms that seemed eager to support your plans. The room was silent as the realization struck him like a punch. Every step he had taken to seize control had been built on lies. Lies that were now crumbling beneath him. You can't do this, he hissed, grabbing my arm as I passed. I'm your husband. I pulled away, my voice steady and firm. Actually, as of this morning, you're not. The divorce papers were filed an hour ago. You might want to check your email. The collective gasp from the employees was almost comical. Marcus fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking, only to discover that his access to the company servers had already been revoked. Security will escort you out, I said, nodding to the two guards now standing at the door. Don't worry about packing up. We'll send your things to your new address. Oh, and Marcus, I added, my voice cutting through the tension like a blade. You might want to review the prenup you signed. The infidelity clause is particularly enlightening. As the guards let him out, still sputtering protests, I turned to the room full of stunned employees. I owe you all an explanation and you'll get one. But first, we have work to do. Sarah, could you pull up the quarterly projections? The room slowly came back to life, though the whispers had already started. How long had I been planning this? How had I managed it? And most importantly, what kind of leader orchestrates something like this? They were about to find out. The aftermath of Marcus's removal sent shockwaves through the industry. Within hours, news of how the wife of a would-be corporate usurper had orchestrated one of the most elegant takedowns in business history spread like wildfire. Reporters called it a masterclass in strategy and resilience. I spent the next week in back-to-back meetings, reassuring clients and partners that the company was stable. But something unexpected happened. Rather than causing panic, the incident bolstered our reputation. Clients who had been hesitant to work with us suddenly showed renewed interest. Your handling of the situation, one CEO told me, showed exactly the kind of strategic thinking we want in a partner. Meanwhile, Marcus was learning just how thoroughly I had outmaneuvered him. The prenup he signed, without reading, I might add, contained a clause about infidelity that not only protected my personal assets but required him to repay every penny he'd earned during our marriage if he was caught cheating. The evidence I had gathered over the years, hotel receipts, secret bank accounts, photos, was airtight. His secretary, once she realized he had been playing her too, was all too happy to cooperate. He's trying to negotiate, Sandra told me during one of our daily briefings, offering to drop any claims to company assets if you waive the prenup penalties. I considered it for a moment before shaking my head. No deals. He needs to understand that actions have consequences. In the months that followed, the company thrived without Marcus's secret siphoning of resources. His removal was the fresh start we needed, and our newfound strength proved it. I wasn't just rebuilding, I was setting us up for a future brighter than ever before. Our profits increased by 40%. The toxic culture Marcus had fostered among certain executives cleared up quickly once they realized their protector was gone. The environment became more collaborative, and productivity soared. One morning, about 6 months after the failed takeover, I arrived at the office to find an envelope on my desk. Inside was a handwritten letter from Marcus's mother, Margaret. "I always knew you were smart," she wrote, "but I never realized just how capable you were. Marcus told me everything, not willingly, but the truth has a way of coming out. I want you to know that while he's my son, I understand why you did what you did. He needed this lesson, even if he doesn't see it yet." I folded the letter and tucked it away in my desk. Margaret had always been kind to me, even when her son wasn't. Her words meant more than she probably realized. The real changes, however, came in how I ran the company. The experience taught me invaluable lessons about trust, vigilance, and the importance of building a resilient organization. I implemented new oversight measures, created a transparent corporate structure, and established a foundation to help women in business protect themselves from similar situations. 1 year after Marcus's failed takeover, I stood in the same conference room where it all came to a head. This time, we were celebrating our most successful quarter ever, and I had an important announcement to make. As some of you know, I began looking around the room at the faces of people who had stood by me. "We're launching a new initiative today. The Phoenix program will provide resources, legal support, and mentorship to women entrepreneurs who find themselves in vulnerable positions. Because sometimes the biggest threats to our success come from those closest to us." Sarah, now our CEO, was the first to applaud. The rest of the room followed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt warmth, not from victory or revenge, but from knowing we were making a real difference. As for Marcus, last I heard, he was working as a junior accountant at a small firm in Denver, living in a studio apartment and driving the same car he had when we first met. Sometimes karma has a perfect sense of irony. The company continues to grow, not just in profits, but in integrity and purpose. The shell corporations I created to protect myself from Marcus now fund programs that help other women protect their dreams. In the end, Marcus did teach me something valuable. Success isn't just about building something great. It's about being smart enough to protect it. He thought he could take everything from me, but instead he gave me the push I needed to become even stronger. Now when people ask about Marcus and the takeover attempt, I just smile and say, sometimes the best revenge is simply being prepared. While he was plotting to steal my company, I was learning the most important lesson in business. Trust is good, but documentation is better. The conference room where it all ended still exists, but I've had it renovated. The old mahogany table where Marcus once shredded with his forged documents has been replaced with a modern design, featuring a subtle phoenix pattern etched into the wood grain. It's a daily reminder that from the ashes of betrayal, something stronger can rise.